Hey guys! Tonight we're slipping back to a time when love was more complicated than swiping right, where your best shot at finding romance was locking eyes over a muddy turnip in a crowded, smelly marketplace. The year is somewhere around 1280. The air smells like wet wool in freshly dumped chamber pots. And your breath smells worse. You're bundled in layers of scratchy linen, your boots are leaking, and your best outfit still has chicken feathers in the hem. But hey, there they are, across the market square. Cheeks slightly red from the cold, arms full of root vegetables, laughing at something their friend said. Your heart does that thing, and now, boom, you're in trouble. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the marketplace again. Always the marketplace. Because where else would you go to find someone cute in a town with no theater, no bars, and absolutely no privacy? This is your social network. A muddy street lined with wooden stalls, grumpy vendors, and the relentless smell of onions. You shuffle past a cheese cart and try to casually look toward the fishmonger's stall. She's still there, still has all her teeth, which is impressive. She's wearing that same brown apron from last week, hair braided with a bit of blue ribbon. A hint of personality that, let's be honest, makes your heart do a little somersault. You pretend to examine some cabbages while sneaking another glance. She's talking to someone, a customer, her brother, a future husband. The anxiety is very now, even if the setting isn't. Dating in the medieval era isn't so much a structured date as it is a sequence of increasingly bold public interactions, always under the gaze of 100 curious eyes and one very suspicious goose. You make your move, or at least you sort of hover nearby. You strike up a conversation with the carrot seller next to her, hoping she'll notice your charming opinions about root vegetables. She does. She glances over. You panic and drop a turnip. It lands with a squelch in the mud. Smooth. But in this world, smooth isn't the goal. Survival is. Romantic gestures are subtle. A glance held too long. A joke that isn't entirely about pigs. A shared smile during a bell toll. Marriage age is early, especially among peasants. Girls might marry as young as 14 or 15, boys a bit later when they can prove they own. Literally anything. A pig, a tool, some land, something, anything. And love? That's optional. You're not exactly looking for a soulmate here. You're looking for someone who smells only slightly like goat, shares your opinion on how much is too much mud, and maybe owns a decent ale pot. Still, there are rules. Even down in the mud with the commoners, there's etiquette. You don't just walk up and say, "Hi, I like your hair," number that's dangerously forward. Instead, you might offer a helpful hand lifting a basket, or you might loan someone a nice stick if theirs breaks. True story. Sticks were valuable, not metaphorically, like actual firewood. You help her balance her basket. She thanks you. Eye contact, boom, a spark. Or maybe just a mutual understanding that winter is cold and you both have elbows. Either way, it's something. Now comes the slow dance. You see her again, at the well, near the blacksmith's stall, at the midsummer festival. Each time, a little more talking, a little more smiling. The village starts to notice. So does your aunt, who is now telling everyone you're in love, and she wants grandchildren before the next harvest. And here's the kicker. You probably haven't even touched each other's hands yet. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly romantic in the modern sense, or just practical survivalists making the best of muddy luck. But there's evidence, in songs and folk stories, of laughter, longing, and the universal chaos of crushes. One 13th century poem describes a boy carving a heart into a tree, only to be yelled at by the forester. So yes, the feels were real, but they were also risky. You see, the church has opinions. Lots of opinions. Courtship before marriage? Fine. But no funny business. Touching? Absolutely not. Kissing? That's basically premarital heresy. And if your relationship crosses the line before vows are exchanged, expect a long sermon, and possibly some awkward public penance. Still, people are people, and hormones exist, even in wool tunics. Flirtation finds its way. It wriggles in between lines of a song, in a playful comment at a festival, in the way someone carries 2 mugs of ale and offers you one without asking. You might even exchange small gifts. A woven ribbon, a lucky stone. One brave soul once gifted a boiled egg wrapped in a piece of linen. That's commitment. But you must be careful. Because if a rival suitor, let's call him Ralph, gets jealous, things can escalate fast. Ralph might start showing up wherever you are, at the well, at the tavern, behind a particularly judgmental cow. He glares. You glare back. There are no duels. You're a peasant, not a knight. But there might be a turf war over sheep herding routes. Eventually, if things go well, and Ralph gives up, you find yourself invited to her family's hut for supper. Her mother eyeballs you like a hawk. Her father grunts in your direction. Her siblings are poking each other and whispering about weddings. The pressure is unreal, but the food is warm, and her smile across the fire says more than any love poem ever could. Later that night, walking home by moonlight, you realize something big. You are now expected to propose. Not with a ring, not even with words necessarily. A shared task, a public statement. Asking her father to borrow a plow might be enough. Romance is hard when everyone's watching, but you've made it this far. And as you duck into your cottage, dodging a falling thatch of straw, you smile. Tomorrow you'll bring her a better turnip. You wake up with hay in your hair and the vague memory of promising someone's sister that you'd help butcher a goose this morning. But that can wait, because today, you're not just a mud-streaked peasant with cold feet. Today, you're someone with a potential courtship. And if you're going to impress a girl whose idea of flirting is offering the good corner seat near the fire, you'd better step up your game. Which brings us to the world of courtly love, the elite's bizarre, rule-heavy version of romance that makes your awkward vegetable flirting look like a rave. You're not a noble, let's get that clear. But tonight, you're going to imagine what it would be like to love like a lord. Picture it, you, in a fur-lined tunic, brooding in a castle window, sighing so hard your squire is concerned. Across the great hall sits the lady of your dreams, literally untouchable, frequently married, and always surrounded by 6 layers of family, attendance, and social obligation. Welcome to courtly love, the ultimate test of patience, poetry, and not making a total fool of yourself. Here's the thing. You don't actually date her. You write songs about her, you send secret tokens, maybe a ring, maybe a lock of your hair, maybe a handkerchief you accidentally drop on her horse. And if you're lucky, if fate, fortune, and her father allow, she might smile at you at dinner. This system, bizarre as it seems now, was actually a sort of emotional playground for nobility who couldn't exactly marry for love. Nobles married for alliances, not for butterflies. So this fake love game, where no one touches and everyone suffers, gave them an outlet. It was passion at a polite distance. And the rules? Oh, they were strict. There were actual lists, like The Art of Courtly Love, which reads like a 12th century dating manual for masochists. Some highlights? Love cannot exist between married people. Yes, really. Jealousy makes love stronger. A man must always be slightly miserable. A lover must always obey his lady. Too much happiness? You're doing it wrong. Historians still argue whether courtly love was ever truly real or just literary roleplay. But the poetry survives. Pages and pages of knights professing their longing in painfully overdramatic stanzas. Your eyes, like 2 falcons, one writes. Your braid, the golden rope of my doom. It's the medieval version of texting your crush at 2 a.m. You up? Thinking obture braid. Now imagine you're that lady. You're 15, already betrothed to some duke with gout, and now some dashing knight is carving sonnets into the bark of your orchard trees. You can't text him. You can't meet him. You can't even wink without getting scolded. So you play along with clever metaphors and subtle gestures. You wear the brooch he gave you at the tournament. You choose the red ribbon instead of the blue one. That's a full-on declaration. But it's not all poetry and pining. Sometimes feelings do become mutual, and sometimes those feelings push against the tight seams of social expectation. Affairs happened. Letters got intercepted. Jealous husbands got suspicious. And when things went sideways, it was rarely the man who got punished. Still, for the lucky and brave few, courtly love sometimes led to real relationships. There are records of noble women defying arranged marriages, running off with knights they actually liked. It didn't always end well, but in a world ruled by inheritance, titles, and land, choosing love was the medieval equivalent of going full rebel. And let's not forget the tournaments, the ultimate peacock parade. You're back in your fantasy now, polishing your armor before the big event. You've tied your lady's ribbon to your spear, which is wildly symbolic and only slightly dangerous. You ride out into the lists, cheered on by the crowd, risking your ribs for the honor of her smile. Will she throw you a flower? Maybe. Will she marry you? Absolutely not. Still, the point isn't winning her. It's the performance. And that's what medieval romance, especially among nobles, often boiled down to. A grand, ongoing performance. Layers of etiquette, duty, poetry, and theatrics, all wrapped up in the illusion of love. In many ways, it was less about connection and more about emotional self-expression in a world where choices were few and gossip was everywhere. Yet even in all its ridiculousness, there's something touching here. Because whether you're a peasant handing over your best turnip or a knight bleeding for a smile, the core truth remains. People wanted to be loved, to feel seen, to matter to someone beyond their dowry or their acreage or their ability to churn butter without spilling. So you, dreaming in your itchy wool blanket, begin to wonder what kind of lover you'd be in that world. Would you write her a poem, climb a rose trellis at night, or just stand awkwardly behind a horse, hoping she notices your new hose? You roll over and think about the ribbon in her braid, or the way she passed you the salt with a smirk, or the fact that she hasn't married Ralph yet, and that probably means something. Tomorrow you vow you'll be braver. You'll say something more than nice turnips. Maybe even a compliment. Just one. Unless there's a chaperone. The fire has gone out in your hearth, but your brain is still warm, spinning with thoughts of nobility, poetry, and ribbon-swathed tournaments you'll never afford. But let's get real again. You're not a knight. You don't live in a tower. And the only tournament you're entering is the one where Old Man Tybor throws turnips at rats behind the tavern. So forget the castles. Tonight, you're back where most medieval romances actually happened. The peasant tavern. The thatched roof leaks in 3 places. The ale is warm, flat, and suspiciously chewy. But it's Saturday night and the benches are full. The fire crackles. The smell of spiced pork, or maybe bad mutton, hangs in the air. Laughter is thick. Somewhere in the back, a guy with one eyebrow is playing a hurdy-gurdy way too loud. And next to the fire, she's there. Your maybe girlfriend, or maybe not. You're not even sure. You spoke twice. Once she laughed, once she sneezed directly into her sleeve and apologized. It was adorable. This is dating in its rawest, realest form. You're surrounded by noise, goats, and extended family. Romance lives in stolen glances and shouted jokes over the din. You slide onto the bench beside her and attempt to flirt. Unfortunately, she can't hear you. You repeat yourself. She leans closer. You panic and yell something about sheep smooth. Still, she laughs again. That's a win. You offer to buy her a cup of ale, which costs more than you want to admit. She accepts. You feel like a king. Peasant romance isn't about subtlety. It's about survival and spark, often in that order. Most peasants married within their own village, or the next one over. Courtship was less about compatibility and more about proximity. Did you grow up 3 huts apart? Do your families get along? Does she own a chicken? You're halfway there. And here's something wild. Many peasants actually had more freedom in choosing their partners than nobles did. That's right. You, in your mud-covered boots, might have more say in who you marry than a baron's daughter in a gold-threaded gown. Because no one's trying to merge estates with your marriage. You're just trying not to die alone in a plague-ridden barn. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. Families still have opinions. Mothers still whisper. Fathers still glower. But there's room for choice, sometimes, even for love. Historians still argue whether peasant marriages were driven more by affection or economic necessity. But plenty of accounts describe couples who genuinely seem to enjoy each other. One 14th century letter from a miller's wife describes her husband as, "my loud, rude joy." We love that for her. So here you are, sharing ale with your maybe girlfriend, listening to a very bad song about cows. She's funny. She's clever. She's probably better at sewing than you'll ever be at anything. You try to impress her with a story about the time you saw a wolf and didn't run. You lie a little. She doesn't call you on it. Then the candle sputters low and things shift. You lean in. She leans back, then forward again. Your knees bump. The air goes quiet, except for one guy vomiting behind a barrel, but emotionally, it's quiet. And then comes the inevitable family interruption. A cousin, a brother, a protective aunt. Someone plops between you and starts talking loudly about pigs. It's not personal, it's cultural. Unchaperoned flirtation? That's how scandal starts, and no one wants to end up before the local priest explaining why you were laughing too hard near someone's daughter. So you wait, you smile, you share a bread crust and let your fingers brush. It's like electricity, but with splinters. Let's zoom out for a second. Taverns in medieval towns and villages were more than drinking holes. They were social hubs. Deals were made here. News was shared. Songs were invented. And yes, flirting happened. Carefully, quietly, with a constant awareness that if you cross the line, everyone will know by morning. Gossip travels faster than the plague, and it's far more survivable, but only slightly less brutal. Still, the tavern offered a rare chance at semi-private connection, a break from work, a moment to feel human, to feel seen. Even if you spent the rest of the week knee-deep in pig slop, you finish your ale. She finishes hers. You stand, stretch, and awkwardly gesture toward the door. She nods. You walk her home, which is 4 doors down. No hand-holding. No. Just the shared rhythm of footsteps and night air. At her gate, you pause. Say something. Anything. You blurt, "Your braid is symmetrical." Then flee into the dark. She laughs. You'll survive this. Probably. It's early morning now. Cold seeps in through the cracks in your shutters, and you wake to the sound of a rooster with no concept of time management. Your feet are still muddy from last night's walk, and you're not sure whether you dreamed about symmetrical braids or actually said that out loud. Hint, you definitely said it. Everyone heard. But there's no time to relive your awkwardness. Today is a church festival, and that means dressing up, acting innocent, and trying very hard not to fall in love during the offertory hymn. The village square is already buzzing. There are garlands of dried flowers, banners that used to be white, children chasing each other with sticks, and, most importantly, people watching you. This is the medieval version of being on a reality show. One wrong look and 3 grandmothers are praying for your soul. But you're not here for the drama. You're here for her. She's wearing her Sunday best. A freshly washed apron, hair braided tight, and, dare you say it, a hint of saffron on her sleeves. Saffron. That's practically luxury. Your heart does a little jig. You adjust your belt and try to look pious. But here's the catch. You're at church, and church means rules. The church in medieval Europe had a complicated relationship with love. Marriage. Sacred, flirting, suspect, premarital anything. Definitely no. But festivals? Those were loopholes. Today is a saint's day. Everyone's outside. The rules are looser. There's music. There's food. There's even a dramatic reenactment of some biblical event involving fake swords and bad acting. It's festive, yes, but also charged. Emotions are high. People are watching, judging, whispering, and flirting. You spot her by the bread table. She's laughing with a friend. You casually hover, pretending to be very interested in the price of rye loaves. She sees you, smiles, moves closer, and then a monk walks by. Now, not all monks are the fun kind. This one is squinting at you like he's mentally assigning penance. You flinch. She stifles a laugh. You both pretend to discuss grain. See, monastic authorities often patrol these festivals with eagle eyes and zero chill. Flirt too openly? You might be called into confession. Hold hands? Expect a lecture. Kiss? Prepare for public penance, which might involve standing barefoot outside the church with a sign around your neck that reads "fornicator," while children throw cabbage at you. And yes, that happened. But people still found ways to connect. Love, like water, finds cracks in the walls. You might drop a token into her hand. A ribbon, a carved bead, a little wooden bird. She might return it next week with a flower tied around its neck. Historians still argue whether these token exchanges were part of formal betrothal or just low-stakes romance, but they crop up again and again in records, letters, and old songs. One 14th century ballad tells of a girl who gave her crush a dried plum wrapped in wool. It was stolen by a goat. The relationship survived. You finally get a moment alone, or as alone as you can be when surrounded by 300 people, 2 cows, and your neighbor's 6 children. You're standing near the edge of the festival grounds, just past the chicken pen, under the shadow of a crumbling wall. She's close. So close you can hear her breath hitch when you say something dumb about the weather. It's a moment. A moment. You lean in, just slightly. And then, "Brother Thomas," someone shouts. "They're reenacting the martyrdom early." You jump like you've been shot with a crossbow. She hides a smile behind her sleeve. The spell breaks, and you walk back to the crowd, where a red-faced blacksmith is dramatically pretending to die while children poke him with sticks. Romance? Interrupted by saints and sweaty theatrics. But the day's not over. As the sun dips low, music starts again. Someone's playing a crumb horn. It sounds like a goose with opinions. People start to dance, hands linked, spinning in wide, muddy circles. It's clumsy, joyful, and very, very medieval. She dances near you. Not with you. Not yet. But the space between you closes inch by inch until finally, her fingers brush yours. It's 1 second, no one sees, but your whole chest lights up like someone struck flint. Afterward, as you walk home alone, moonlight spilling across the path, you remember her laugh, the softness of her sleeve, the way she whispered, "Nice shoes," before the monk glared at her. You grin like an idiot, and for a moment, even with all the rules, all the risk, all the cabbage-wielding children, you think this might be love. This might. The sky is barely light when you're jolted awake by the sound of your mother yelling about borrowed firewood and the neighbor's thieving goat. You groan, roll over, and stare at the thatched ceiling, still replaying yesterday's near handhold like it was the climax of an epic tale. But today is different. Today, your family is talking marriage. You were hoping for more stolen glances and maybe another awkward encounter near the well. Instead, you walk into the main room and see your father hunched over the table looking grim. Your mother is whispering, which means something serious is going down. And then you hear it. Dowry. Your stomach drops. Here's the thing about medieval dating. You might think you're the main character in your own romance story, but the moment things start getting serious, you're not in charge anymore. The second, a relationship looks remotely permanent, especially if either party has something valuable, a field, a cow, or just a decent reputation. It becomes a family affair, and not in a cozy, let's plan a wedding way, in a bargaining, goat-counting, slightly threatening way. Marriage in the Middle Ages was a contract, first and foremost, especially among peasants, where everything had economic consequences. Who marries whom determines who inherits what, who works where, and who borrows whose tools until the end of time. You're not just choosing a partner, you're creating a lifelong alliance between families who might already be quietly feuding about pig fence boundaries. So now, you're in the middle of negotiations. And let's be honest, you have no idea what's going on. Your mother is muttering numbers. Your father is sipping ale too early in the day. And you hear someone mention your future in-laws' surprisingly aggressive geese. The girl, your girl, is at home, likely doing the same thing, sitting awkwardly as her aunt discusses your family's habits and whether you snore. Historians still argue how much say young people really had in these arrangements. Some records suggest peasant kids had genuine input. Others point to parents making the final call. One 15th century complaint in a parish record reads, "The lad was willing, but the girl's father said he lacked discipline and shoes." Ouch. And then, of course, there's the dowry. For girls, it was the stuff her family gave to her marriage. A few coins, a spinning wheel, maybe a goat, or even a plot of land. For boys, especially in wealthier peasant families, there might be a bride price, or resources offered to seal the deal. You're offering half a barrel of dried beans and your uncle's hammer, which you technically haven't asked to borrow yet. But it's more than stuff. It's a promise, a signal that both families are willing to invest in this relationship. There's a lot of math, a lot of arguing. At one point, someone brings up how much your cousin's marriage cost last year, and a whole new side argument explodes like dry tinder. You slip out during a particularly heated moment about how many chickens make a fair trade. You walk down to the stream to cool off, kicking a stone and muttering, "This was easier when we were just awkwardly smiling at each other in church." Because here's the hard part. You care, genuinely. You liked her before the negotiations, before the dried beans and firewood promises. You liked her laugh, her terrible jokes, the way she carries firewood like it owes her money. But now, it's all being translated into currency and livestock. You sit on a stump and watch the water move, trying to imagine a life with her, sharing chores, arguing about onions, laughing when your cow escapes again. The stuff no one writes poems about. It's not glamorous, but it feels real. Back home, things are calming down. A tentative agreement has been reached. The dowry is settled. She'll bring 2 goats, some linen, and the promise of a decent bread recipe. You'll bring tools, manual labor, and the vague hope that your knees won't give out before 40. There's one final step. The betrothal. Not a wedding, not yet, but a public promise, often spoken in front of witnesses, that you intend to marry. It might involve clasped hands. It might involve blessings from the local priest. Sometimes, it even involves the couple lying together in a symbolic bed, with a sword between them, because romance is nothing without steel and awkwardness. The betrothal is binding. Break it, and there might be consequences: gossip, church fines, or worse, having to return the goats. You meet her eyes again that night during a quiet meal. Her parents are there. Yours are too. No one's smiling. Everyone is watching. You reach for a piece of bread at the same time. Your fingers brush. And this time, no one interrupts. Your palms are sweaty. Not in a poetic, star-crossed lovers kind of way. More like in a, you're about to hand over a piece of scrap parchment with your terrible handwriting on it and hope it doesn't ruin everything kind of way. Today, you're writing a love letter, which in medieval terms is somewhere between sacred ritual and total catastrophe. You sit cross-legged on the floor of your family's cramped hut, a splintery board balanced across your knees, clutching a goose feather quill like it might explode. There's a tiny jar of ink beside you, suspiciously sticky. You've already ruined 2 sheets. One smudged into oblivion when your sleeve brushed it. The other just had too many hearts and not enough sentences. Now you try again. To the most kind and wise lady of the streamside cottage, whom I didst observe on the occasion of St. Mildred's feast. You pause. Do people say didst anymore? Did they ever? Welcome to the romantic battlefield of medieval letter writing, a noble tradition practiced by everyone from starry-eyed squires to overambitious plowboys. Letters weren't just communication. They were the vehicle for romance when face-to-face contact meant risking your reputation, your dignity, and possibly a marriage proposal you weren't ready for. But you brave soul that you are, put it all down in ink. Letters in this era weren't always written by the lover themselves. If you were wealthy or illiterate, which, let's be honest, most people were, you might ask a friend, a priest, or even a local scribe to help craft your message. Some of these guys were basically early ghostwriters, spitting out love poems between land deeds and receipts for pig feed. Historians still argue whether medieval love letters were more sincere or performative. Some were flowery enough to make modern romance novels look tame. Others were brutally direct. One surviving note from the 14th century simply says, "I seen you at the well. You are good at spinning. I like your neck." Iconic. Your own letter is somewhere in between. You try for balance. One line about her lovely eyes, one about how well she carries a bucket, and one weird metaphor involving honey and oxen that you immediately regret, but don't cross out because ink is expensive. You carefully fold it and seal it with a blob of wax. It's not real wax. It's melted candle drippings with a thumbprint, but it feels official. Now comes the hardest part, delivery. You can't exactly march up and hand it to her. That would cause a village-wide panic. No, you need subtlety. Stealth, a messenger. Enter your cousin. He's 12, missing a shoe, and cannot be bribed. But you promise him a slice of bread and your turnip carving knife if he delivers it without opening it or shouting, "Hey, someone wrote you a love thing." You watch from behind a fence as he trots off, letter in hand. She's out front feeding chickens. He hands it to her. She reads it, smiles. She smiles. Then she slips the parchment into her apron and goes back to the chickens like it was nothing. You nearly faint. Later that day, you find a bundle tucked behind the water barrel. Inside, a pressed flower, a bit of blue string, and a note that says, "Nice oxen metaphor. You write strange. You float home." But this whole exchange opens a new door, the secret world of coded love language. In medieval Europe, especially in the later Middle Ages, couples often develop their own ways to speak privately under the eyes of the village. Maybe you always wear a red cap on days you want to meet at the stream. Maybe she ties her braid with green yarn when she's in a bad mood. Maybe a gift of a hazelnut means, "Meet me after sundown," while a goose feather means, "Please stop writing about my elbows." It's not just romantic, it's survival. Because while love is a fire, gossip is wildfire, and you're both just trying not to get burned. There's also a bit of practical strategy. A letter might serve as a test of literacy. If you write well, it means you probably had schooling, maybe access to books, and possibly more resources than you let on. Writing letters also signals emotional investment. You're literally bleeding ink and your ego onto parchment. That counts. And if you're noble, letters are your only lifeline, especially for long-distance lovers separated by duty, war, or incredibly slow horses. Entire affairs were carried out by quill, sometimes for years, without the couple seeing each other in person. One of the most famous examples? Abelard and Eloise, a scholar and a nun, writing each other for decades through heartbreaking, intellectual, and occasionally very spicy letters. No chickens involved. Back in your world, things are heating up. You've exchanged 3 notes, each one more daring than the last. Your metaphors are slightly better. Her responses are wittier. She called you a funny turnip man once, and you haven't stopped thinking about it since. Then one day, tucked inside a note, you find a tiny scrap of fabric with a little stitchwork on it. Your name. It's the medieval equivalent of getting tagged in a relationship status update. And it hits you like a ton of firewood. This is real. This is happening. You tuck the note into your belt, heart pounding like a runaway horse. You don't need a poet or a monk or a knight's shiny armor. You've got ink stains on your fingers, a cousin who wants more bread, and the world's weirdest metaphors. And somehow, it's working. The sun is setting late these days. Must be midsummer again. The air is sticky, the birds won't shut up, and somewhere nearby, a baby is crying for absolutely no reason. But none of that matters, because tonight, you have a plan. You're going to meet her, alone, unchaperoned, in a garden. Not just any garden. Her family's herb patch, tucked behind a low stone wall out of view from the main path, surrounded by tall hedges and rows of lavender, thyme, and whatever that leafy stuff is that repels fleas. It smells like dirt and dreams. You're not supposed to be here, which is exactly what makes it thrilling. This is a secret tryst, and your heart is doing flips. In the Middle Ages, secret meetings between lovers were equal parts romantic and wildly risky. There were no cell phones, no back doors, no "meet me behind the barn at 8" written in chalk. Just vague signals, ribbons on doorposts, coughs at windows, messages sent through goat-herding siblings. You arrive first, which gives you time to panic. Do you lean against the wall? Stand tall and brooding? Pick some basil as a casual offering? You go with leaning, then standing, then squatting behind the hedgerow when you hear footsteps. It's her, hair down, no apron. A small smile playing at her lips like she's already won this round. She doesn't say anything at first, just walks in, brushes her fingers over the lavender stalks, and looks at you like you're the one who smells nice. You freeze. Time collapses into heartbeats and rustling leaves. In this moment, you understand why people write bad poetry, why they steal kisses in the dark, why they risk everything for something as silly and serious as love. She finally speaks. You're late? You're not. But you laugh, because arguing would break the spell. This is your first real moment alone. No cousins, no monks, no gossiping fishwives leaning out of windows. Just you, her, and the frogs croaking somewhere off to the left. You talk. About nothing, mostly. How Brother Anselm tripped on his robes again. How your neighbor's chicken now thinks it's a cat. How the weather might ruin the barley, and how, somehow, this might be the best night of your life anyway. And then you inch closer. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Because despite the thrill, the garden, the twilight, and the butterflies doing cartwheels in your stomach, you're not supposed to touch her. Seriously, not even accidentally. Medieval social norms, especially for unmarried couples, were stricter than a tax collector on Lent. One brush of the hand could spark scandal. A kiss? Well, that's basically proposing and inviting excommunication at the same time. Historians still argue whether these standards were universally enforced, or if country folk were more relaxed than the records suggest. What we do know is this. Couples found ways. Some hugged, some held hands behind barrels, some literally kissed through holes in cloister walls. There are recorded cases of garden walls and midnight meetings being the backdrop for everything from heartfelt confessions to very unchaste behavior. Tonight, you're walking that tightrope. You hand her a tiny posy of herbs, mostly mint and something that might be weeds. She accepts it like it's crown jewels. You both laugh about how badly it smells. And then the air gets quiet again. She looks up. You're inches apart. You forget your metaphors, your speech, your rehearsed joke about pigs. And then, what are you doing? A voice from the hedge. It's her brother, younger, suspicious, holding a stick like he might use it. You both jump 3 feet apart. He squints at you, sniffs, and says, "Papa says you'd better be out of here before the bell tolls." You nod. She sighs. The spell is broken, but only slightly. She winks. You're in too deep now. After you leave the garden, heart pounding and eyes wide, you realize something. That one moment of almost kiss, that shared silence in the herb-scented dark, will stay with you forever. It's nothing, technically, but also, it's everything. The rules may be rigid, the walls may be high, but somehow love always finds the tiniest crack to slip through. Later, in bed, you replay the entire evening from memory like a bard performing a one-man show. You whisper your best lines into the straw mattress. You wonder if she's doing the same. You imagine what would have happened if you'd been brave enough to kiss her, or what might happen next time. And as sleep finally wraps its arms around you, you dream of time-scented moonlight and soft laughter behind garden walls. The next few days pass in a blur of sheep, chores, and secondhand gossip. The weather turns. Rain falls sideways. The mud deepens. And your cousin breaks his arm falling off a fence while pretending to joust with a pitchfork. You help wrap it with rags and good intentions. But your thoughts are somewhere else. You haven't seen her since the garden. And the silence? It's unbearable. Until one morning, in the middle of the square, while arguing over stale bread with a very passive-aggressive baker, you see her across the crowd, talking to someone. Not just someone. Ralph. Yes, that Ralph. The guy with one eyebrow, 3 sheep, and the personality of a wooden spoon. The one who's been lurking like a plague rat with a mustache ever since you started writing love letters. And now, he's talking to your girl. She doesn't look thrilled. But she doesn't look not thrilled either. She's smiling politely. He's leaning too close. You feel your stomach do that thing it does right before you eat bad fish. Welcome to the medieval group date experience, also known as every conversation involving more than 2 people, a chaperone, and at least 1 goat. You march over, not in an aggressive way, just firm. She sees you. Relief flickers across her face for a heartbeat before she schools it into a neutral smile. Ralph gives you the up-down. His mouth twitches like he's trying to smirk and sneeze at the same time. She introduces you both. You nod. He grunts. Polite standoff, medieval edition. Then, like a divine prank, her aunt appears. This is the aunt, the one who always smells like pickled turnips in disappointment, the one who hasn't smiled since the feast of St. Frigidus in 1276. She wedges herself physically between you and your crush, like a particularly judgmental cabbage. "Well," she says, "isn't it nice to see such clean young men spending time near decent girls?" No one breathes. You try to speak. She hands you a mug of mead instead. You sip. It's awful. Ralph sips too. He makes a face. You don't. Victory. And then comes the worst part. Small talk. The aunt launches into a long, meandering monologue about her cousin's wedding, which involved a pie with live doves in it and ended with someone fainting into the stew. You stand there, nodding, the mug growing warmer in your hand, while trying to make eye contact with the girl who is now strategically studying a puddle. Group settings like this were common during medieval courtship. You were allowed to interact, but only under watchful eyes and while pretending everything was completely platonic and deeply boring. Think of it like dating in a fishbowl, surrounded by your relatives, and the fish have opinions. Still, these awkward group interactions had a purpose. They were tests. Could you carry yourself well in public? Did you know how to behave? Would you pour a drink for her uncle or insult someone's embroidery? One wrong move and it's over. You'll be labeled unworthy or worse, improper. So you play the game. You laugh at the aunt's pie story. You let Ralph brag about his newest sheep. You make a polite comment about barley prices that almost sounds informed. Your crush hides a smile behind her sleeve. That's the signal. You're doing well, then chaos. Someone knocks over a jug of mead. A dog starts barking. The goat gets loose. In the confusion, she slips you something. A tiny bundle of cloth. You hide it in your sleeve and excuse yourself. Heart racing. Back at home, away from the crowd, you unroll it. Inside is a hair ribbon, blue, a tiny knot in the corner. It's not just an accessory. It's a message. She chose you, despite Ralph, despite the aunt, despite every single cabbage-based obstacle thrown in your path. You sit down hard, the ribbon in your hands, and laugh. Because even though you haven't kissed her, haven't said the words, haven't done more than brush fingers across the corner of a turnip stall, this is love, and it is ridiculously inconvenient. Later that week, you're summoned. Her family is hosting a dinner, not fancy, just stew and bread and judgment. You wash your face twice, comb your hair, wear your second-best tunic, the one with only one patched elbow. Dinner is a gauntlet of awkward smiles, probing questions, and her younger siblings throwing bread crusts at your knee. You try to impress with your knowledge of local pig breeds. Her father grunts. Her mother nods. You pass the test. Barely. As the evening winds down, you catch her eye. She looks tired, amused, and maybe just a little in love. You wonder what she sees in you. Then again, you think, maybe she's asking the same thing. And that, right there, is how it goes. Two people orbiting each other in a world of gossip, goats, and aggressive supervision. Finding little spaces to say, I see you, I choose you, I'm still here, even if Aunt Cabbage disagrees. It's official. You're in a relationship now. Or at least something that smells like one. There have been letters, glances, trysts, mead, an aunt, a goat, and a ribbon. And in medieval terms, that's practically a honeymoon. But what happens when things don't work out? Welcome to the heartbreak side of the Middle Ages. Breakups back then weren't about unfollowing someone on parchment or leaving them on red via candlelight. No, they were loud, messy, and occasionally cursed. Let's say, for a moment, it doesn't go your way. You show up to the well one morning, and she's not there. Then the next, and the next. Finally, you catch wind that she's been betrothed to someone else. A wheelwright's son from 2 villages over. He owns his own ox cart, wears boots with no holes, has all his teeth. You try not to panic. You walk the long way home, kicking stones and muttering Latin phrases you only half remember. Et tu, turnip girl? The grief is real. So is the embarrassment. And the loss isn't just personal, it's public. Because medieval relationships are rarely private affairs. Everyone knows, everyone watches, and everyone has opinions. Loud ones. You return the small token she gave you. The ribbon, the carved bead, the weirdly shaped love spoon. And she sends back your notes. Sometimes. Other times, she burns them. Or worse, hands them to her cousin who reads them aloud in the tavern while imitating your serious poetry voice. Heartbreak hurts more when there are sheep laughing, and it's not just you. Medieval records are full of romantic disasters. One 15th century English court document tells of a man who sued a woman for breaking their betrothal. She'd accepted his gift of a silver brooch, which apparently counted as a promise. When she later married someone else, he demanded the brooch back, and damages. Historians still argue whether such breakups were about actual emotional betrayal, or just broken contracts. The truth? Probably both. Even if you were a peasant, love could still cut deep. And if it didn't, your pride would. Now imagine you're the one doing the breaking. It's not easy. You try to be kind. You meet her at the edge of the barley field and gently explain that you're not ready. Or that you're moving to your uncle's farm. Or that you had a dream involving an angry goose and you're taking it as a sign. She nods. Says she understands. Then gives you back the spoon with a weird look in her eye. Later that week, your chickens stop laying eggs. Your boots go missing. Your cousin gets a rash. Someone whispers the word hex. Welcome to the world of cursed trinkets and love gone sour. It's not superstition if everyone believes it. In many rural communities, folk magic and breakups went hand in hand. Maybe you gifted her a ribbon laced with rosemary. Maybe she added a knot to it under a full moon. Now that you've spurned her, that knot could turn your milk sour for 6 months. Or make you impotent. Or just really unlucky at dice. Of course, none of this is provable. But when your cat runs away the same night you break up with someone, people notice. But heartbreak doesn't always end in spite. Sometimes it just lingers. You catch sight of her at the harvest dance. She's wearing new braids, not yours, laughing at someone else's joke. Your chest tightens. You dance anyway, smile anyway, pretend you're fine. Then go home and spend 45 minutes angrily chopping firewood that didn't need chopping. And sometimes, the past comes back, a year later, maybe 2. You're older, tired. One of you's widowed, the other never married. You meet at a festival, say a few words. There's a look, a long one, but nothing happens. Because the moment passed, and in the Middle Ages, missed chances stayed missed. There was no sliding into parchment scrolls after a breakup. No second season romance arc. Life moved on, but heartbreak left its mark. In songs, in letters, in folk rituals. Some would carve the name of a lost lover into wood and float it down a stream. Others buried their gifts beneath crossroads. One common practice? Whispering your ex's name 3 times while turning widdershins, counterclockwise, around a hawthorn tree. Did it work? Probably not, but it helped. Because even when everything's made of mud and your entire emotional life hinges on who loaned who a spoon, love still matters. And loss? Loss teaches you to look closer the next time someone smiles at you over a cabbage. So if it does fall apart, if she marries Ralph or runs off with a falconer or joins a convent because of your oxen metaphor, just remember, you were brave enough to care, and you've still got the spoon. Unless that's cursed now too. You're older now, 24, ancient by village standards. You've survived heartbreak, 3 floods, 1 bad haircut, and a winter so cold even the pigs wore scarves. You've seen couples rise and fall like maypole streamers, watched people marry for love, for land, for goats, and once for an unusually attractive bread oven. And now you're thinking about trying again. This time, she's a widow. Kind eyes, steady hands, and a laugh like warm cider. You met her during apple season, hauling crates to the cider press. She didn't flirt. She asked if your back hurt and offered you a piece of dried pear. And suddenly, you wanted to chop wood for her. Forever. Medieval life wasn't long and it wasn't gentle. Remarriage was common, especially for women who were often left with land to manage, mouths to feed, and a society that barely tolerated the idea of female independence. But second marriages? Those were often chosen more freely, less about duty, more about companionship. It feels different this time. There's no breathless letter writing, no secret trysts behind hedgerows, just long conversations while mending fence posts. Shared soup, shoulder touches that linger for half a second too long, and chess. Lots of chess. The board sits between you, carved from rough oak. She's terrifyingly good. You've lost 3 games in one pawn she turned into a tiny spoon for reasons unknown. But you keep playing, because it's not really about the game. It's about the safety of being seen, of being wanted. Not as a prize or a partner to make babies with, but as someone worth talking to after supper. Second marriages came with different expectations. You already know what loss feels like, what love isn't. And if you're lucky, you learn to build something gentler, steadier. Historians still argue whether second marriages were more egalitarian. Some say they were more practical, fewer illusions, fewer expectations. Others suggest they were actually more affectionate, with the pressure of lineage and dowry less intense. People could finally breathe, laugh, argue about how much salt goes in the soup without worrying about offending a political alliance. This time, when you sit beside her at the spring festival, no one raises eyebrows. There's no chaperone, no aunt, just 2 people, older, wiser, surrounded by hay bales and children chasing butterflies. She nudges you with her foot. You pretend not to notice. She pretends you're not pretending. You ask if she wants to go for a walk. She nods. This time, you hold hands. Openly, no one faints. You talk about your past, your first love, the one with the turnip obsession. She talks about her husband, how he died quietly, how she still misses the way he stirred stew. There's no jealousy, just quiet knowing it's not flashy. There are no love poems or carved brooches, just care. Later, back at her cottage, you help her fix a leaky roof tile. She hands you nails. You hand her your heart, basically. It's unspoken, but it's there. One day, she invites you to stay the night. Nothing scandalous, just two grown people, 2 mugs, 1 fire. You sit across from each other, talk about barley prices, laugh about the local priest's terrifying dog. You fall asleep to the sound of the fire cracking and her breath steady beside yours. The next morning, you wake up before dawn. She's already baking. You offer to help. She hands you dough. This is dating now. It's not dramatic or poetic or anything a bard would bother singing about. But it's real, and real is enough. Let's step out of the well-worn lanes of village courtship for a moment and slip into the shadows, into the soft, hidden places of the medieval world where love dared to bloom quietly, secretly, and often dangerously. Tonight, you're someone else. You're a man in a world where your glances at another man must be masked with sarcasm. Or a woman who finds herself watching another woman dance at the harvest festival and thinking, I wish that were allowed. You're not what the world expects. And in the Middle Ages, that could be risky, sometimes fatally so. But here's the truth they don't always teach you in dusty textbooks. Queer love existed in medieval times. Fierce, tender, real, and yes, hidden. You meet them at the monastery, or at the baker's, or during a feast where the wine flows and the torches burn low, and everyone forgets to look too closely. They're laughing, and you catch that sound like a flame catches dry parchment. You don't mean to stare, but you do. And then, they stare back. That's how it starts. A flicker, a maybe, a risk. In a world where marriage is legal, sanctioned, structured, your love is not. You meet in passing, speak in metaphors, touch hands a little too long while exchanging a bowl. Every glance is a sentence. Every graze of a shoulder is a novella. You invent a language of glances, silences, shared bread, and stolen moments in corners where the candlelight doesn't quite reach. Historians still argue how much space the medieval world really had for same-sex relationships. There are legal records, most grim, punishments, accusations, trials, sodomy laws in various kingdoms, burnings in extreme cases. But between the cracks, there are letters, poems, whispered histories. Some monasteries wrote of particular friendships, intense bonds between men, cloaked in religious devotion. Some women took lifelong vows of chastity and lived together as spiritual sisters, sharing everything from finances to funeral plots. Were these romantic, sexual, deeply platonic? The answer is, sometimes yes, sometimes no, and sometimes even scholars can't agree. But love was there. Take Chaucer's Margins, for example. In some medieval manuscripts, scribes left doodles, tiny drawings of men kissing, naked figures, suggestive phrases. Were they jokes? Possibly. But even jokes have roots in reality. Then there's the poetry. In 12th century Arabic Spain, female poets wrote of longing for other women. In Germany, mystical Christian texts describe divine union between same-sex souls. In Icelandic sagas, warriors are described with relationships that blur the line between brotherhood and something more. Back in your medieval skin, you know the rules and the consequences. But that doesn't stop you. You meet beneath the old oak after evening prayers. No one else comes here. You bring bread and dried apples. You sit side by side, knees touching. It's quiet. You talk about the storm coming tomorrow, about how fast the barley grew this year, about how Brother Emmerich fell asleep mid-sermon and snored like a dying bellows. And then, when no one is watching, you lean your head on their shoulder. That's it. Not a kiss. Not a vow. Just a small, defiant act of being close. Later you might exchange gifts. Nothing obvious. A carved comb, a song, a token sewn into the hem of a tunic. You say it's luck. You both know better. And sometimes, if the stars are kind, you get away with it. Your lives wind together like ivy, quietly supporting each other from the shadows. You become companions, friends, aunties. No one asks too many questions. You live, you love, carefully. Other times, you don't. A wrong glance, a bitter neighbor, a whisper to the wrong priest. The hammer comes down hard. There are trials, accusations, confessions dragged out through force. Unnatural, sinful, sodomitical, words like blades. You might be fined, flogged, expelled from your town. In the worst cases, worse. But even in those stories, the love still mattered. Because to fall for someone outside the bounds of what's allowed, and to choose them anyway, is one of the oldest rebellions in human history. You don't always get a happy ending, but in the quiet space where your hands meet beneath a table, in the letter you tuck into a wall crevice, in the way you whisper their name into the night when no one else is around, that's joy, that's fire, that's love. You dream of sea spray and strange music, of eyes you don't recognize and silk robes embroidered with stars. When you wake, your blanket is twisted, your throat is dry, and your mind is full of long-distance longing. Because your crush just left on a boat. He's a foreign trader, or a crusader, or someone's third cousin from Byzantium with very good cheekbones. Whoever he is, he's gone, and you're stuck here, staring at the horizon like a lovesick sheep. Let's talk about foreign flings in the medieval world. You see, for all its mud and mildew, medieval Europe wasn't as isolated as people think. There were pilgrimages, crusades, trade routes, and political marriages that shuffled people across continents like chess pieces. And sometimes, amidst the religious speeches and the sacks of cinnamon, people met and fell hard. It starts simple. You meet him during a trade fair. He's different, darker skin, strange accent, strange food. You ask what he's selling and he laughs and says, "Saffron," like it's a joke. You ask again. He doesn't answer, but he gives you a sample. You go home that night and put saffron in everything. Stew, porridge, bathwater, just to feel closer. These kinds of encounters were rare, but they weren't unheard of. In port cities like Venice, Marseille, and Acre, different cultures rubbed elbows constantly. Sailors flirted in taverns, traders swapped more than just silk, and mercenaries from distant lands left a trail of broken hearts in every village between Jerusalem and York. Sometimes it was scandalous, sometimes it was beautiful, sometimes it was both. Historians still argue whether these foreign romances were genuine connections or exaggerated legends. But we've got receipts, literally, letters in Arabic, Greek, Latin, records of interracial marriages. Even one bizarre court document from 1329 where a Flemish widow tried to claim her Egyptian husband's inheritance after he disappeared during a sandstorm. You wait by the shore for days, then weeks. You hear rumors? His ship sank. His caravan was robbed. He joined a holy order and gave up all worldly possessions, including you. You tell yourself you're over it. Then you see someone wearing a robe the same color as his and you nearly fall into a puddle. Long-distance love in medieval times was agony wrapped in parchment. If you were lucky, you got a letter. Months later, carried by 4 different messengers and half-eaten by a goat. The handwriting's a mess. The ink has run, but you clutch it like treasure. It reads, "I am well. The dates are ripe here. I saw someone today who looked like you and I could not speak for the weight in my chest. I miss you." You cry. Then you dry your eyes and keep moving. Because love doesn't excuse missing market day, not all foreign romances ended in tragedy. Some turned into real alliances, marriages, families. In border towns and crossroads cities, you could sometimes get away with bending the rules, even blending cultures. But it was always a negotiation, with your neighbors, your family, your gods. And when it didn't work, you did what lovers always do when the stars misalign. You carried them with you anyway. In the song you hum while grinding flour, in the way you stir your stew clockwise, because he once said it brings luck, in the bundle of saffron you keep tucked in your sock. Eventually, someone else might catch your eye. Maybe, but some part of you will always scan the crowd for that face, that laugh, that language. And sometimes, just sometimes, you hear it again at a fair, on a boat, passing in the night. You turn, heart leaping, but it's someone else. And yet, for a moment you smile, because it reminds you you're still capable of falling in love, even across oceans, even across lifetimes. You smell it before you see it. Roasted meat, spilled wine, someone burning honey cakes again. And you know what time it is, festival season. The village has transformed. Garlanded poles, painted masks, too much ale, and hay scattered like confetti. There's a man on stilts pretending to be St. Hubert. Children run wild with sticks. The air is chaos, joyful chaos. And tonight, you're hoping to get lucky, in the very medieval sense of the word, which might just mean accidentally brush fingers during a maypole dance and not get yelled at. Because festivals weren't just for saints and sacraments. They were matchmaking machines. The medieval version of speed dating, Instagram thirst traps, and chaotic group chats all rolled into one muddy, music-filled mess. You arrive late, wearing your cleanest tunic, read least stained, and already people are pairing off. You spot her across the square. Not the her. This is someone new. A visiting cousin, perhaps. Or the daughter of the traveling candle maker? She's masked, laughing, spinning in circles with a ribbon tied around her wrist. You don't even know her name? And that's perfect. Because festivals, especially May Day, were built for this. For temporary love, for warm glances, for dancing under trees without worrying about which family owns which cow. Medieval festivals were full of weird, half-Christian, half-pagan rituals. One of the weirdest? The maypole dance, a suspiciously suggestive swirl of youth, fertility symbolism, and accidental elbowing. The ribbons wrap tighter. You find yourself next to her. She giggles. You trip. She catches you. It's clumsy. It's brilliant. Then there's the masking. People wear painted faces, wreaths, animal skins. It's a license to flirt with people you've never spoken to, or maybe have, but anonymously. Maybe you even flirt with someone and only find out hours later it was your childhood friend, or worse, your cousin. Oops, historians still argue about the line between innocent celebration and outright debauchery. Church records from the 13th and 14th centuries often complain about licentious behavior during these events, especially on Midsummer's Eve. One chronicler described it as, quote, an alarming explosion of unruly dancing and casual wooing. Translation: it was a good time. After the dancing, there's the bonfire. You sit near it with a cup of something that might be ale or soup or both. Your mystery girl sits beside you, still masked, still smiling. You talk about nothing, where she's from, whether goats understand human emotions, who won the wrestling match earlier. Spoiler, it was always going to be Agnes the baker. Then, boldly, you ask if she wants to walk. She does. You wander down a moonlit path, firelight flickering behind you. You pass others doing the same. Whispers in the dark, laughter behind haystacks. The air is warm, the night is long. Everything feels slightly unreal. And that's what makes festivals so potent. They're in-between spaces. Not quite ordinary life, not quite fantasy. Time stretches, rules loosen. You say things you wouldn't dare at the marketplace. You ask for a name. She doesn't give it, but she kisses your cheek before slipping away into the crowd. Was it love? Maybe. Was it something? Definitely. And the best part? No expectations, no dowries, no meddling aunts. Just a moment, just you, grinning like an idiot in the dark. You never see her again. Maybe she was just passing through. Maybe she was someone you know behind a mask. Maybe she never existed, just a figment of festival magic. But every spring after that, when the maypole goes up, you catch yourself glancing around, wondering, hoping. Because some loves aren't meant to last. They're meant to glow bright, burn hot, and leave behind the softest ashes. Warm in your memory, scented with lavender, laughter, and candle wax. You don't even see it coming. One day, you're living your normal life, feeding chickens, flirting by candlelight, getting maybe too excited when your crush laughs at your joke about turnips. The next, you're being accused of witchcraft because someone's cousin's brother's cow gave birth to a goat-shaped potato, which apparently is your fault. Welcome to the romantic fallout zone of the medieval world, where being attractive, flirtatious, or just a little too confident could land you in very hot water, literally. It starts small. Whispers, raised eyebrows, a neighbor noticing how people keep smiling at you, a priest muttering that your sudden popularity with the opposite sex is unnatural. Maybe someone saw you giving a ribbon to that handsome Cooper last week. Maybe you made eye contact with 3 different men in one afternoon. Maybe you just have great hair. Either way, suspicion. Because, let's be honest, Powerful, self-assured people, especially women, scared the system. And when those people also happened to be good at herbal remedies, birth predictions, or brewing ale that didn't taste like despair, well, it didn't take much for the village to start sharpening its pitchforks. You wake up to find a bundle of thorns on your doorstep. A bad sign. Someone accuses you of using love potions. Someone else says their crops died because you looked at them funny. And worst of all, they say your flirtations are enchantments. Historians still argue whether the witch trials were more about religious fervor or just an excuse to control unruly women and nonconforming men. The answer? Both. And romance? Oh, romance made you vulnerable. Being visibly desired or openly desiring was risky business. It drew attention, jealousy, fear, especially in smaller communities where gossip was currency and sin was always someone else's fault. You try to explain that you just smile a lot, that your herbs are mostly for upset stomachs and the occasional itchy rash, that your ribbon collection isn't enchanted, just colorful. But by now, the wheel is turning. Once the accusations start, reason goes out the stained glass window. The local priest calls for questioning. The midwife looks at you sideways. That one guy you rejected last year, suddenly he's saying you hexed his sheep. You're not alone. Others have fallen this way before. The baker's widow who brewed calming tea, the shepherd boy who wrote poems to someone's husband, the old woman with too many cats, all accused, all punished. Sometimes it's a fine, a public confession, a forced apology, and a church penance while wearing a sackcloth tunic. Sometimes it's worse. In one town, a woman was put in the stocks for seducing too many men with pies and eye contact. In another, a man was exiled after being found with romantic poems addressed to another man. Some communities dunked the accused in rivers. If you floated, you were guilty. If you sank, well, you were innocent but dead. Congrats. You managed to defend yourself, barely. The priest lets you off with a warning. You're forced to give up your love letters, burn the ribbon, promise not to smile so much. You walk home in silence. Later that night, she visits you, the one who started all this. Not out of cruelty, but fear. She says, I couldn't let them think I loved you. Not like that. They'd take everything. You nod, you understand. The next day, you keep your head down. You go back to work, you stop laughing as loudly, you stop looking people in the eye for too long. But deep down, you still believe love is worth it, even when it hurts, even when it risks everything. Because even in a world terrified of desire, terrified of joy, terrified of difference, it keeps happening. People keep falling for each other, in barns, in alleyways, in church pews, during stormy midsummer nights and awkward harvest feasts. Love survives. Even scandal can't kill it. It might just bury it for a while, like a pressed flower in a book. But you'll find it again, somehow, in a smile across a crowded room, a brush of fingers at the bread stall, a shared glance during the final hymn. You'll find it, because they can burn the ribbons, but they can't burn the feeling. It's been years now. You're no longer the breathless teen trading glances by the well. Your hands are rough, your back aches more than it should, and your heart, though patched in a few places, still beats a little faster when certain memories surface. Tonight, you walk the path behind the churchyard, past the overgrown hedges and the leaning fence, where someone once carved their initials next to yours. You know whose. You always will. It's quiet. The only sound is the wind through the barley and the distant creak of the old chapel bell. You carry a candle in one hand, a sprig of rosemary in the other, a small token, a ritual, one you've done before. Because tonight, you're visiting an old flame. They passed last winter. Fever took them quickly. No drama, no scandal, just the soft hush of breath fading into the cold. You hadn't spoken in years, not really. Just nods across festival fires, the occasional wave from a market cart. But you remember. Oh, you remember. Their laugh, the terrible singing, the way they danced during the midsummer revel and didn't care who watched. You kneel beside the grave. The headstone is simple, weather-worn, a faded carving of a sheaf of wheat, and a name that still makes your chest feel too small. You place the candle on the stone, press the rosemary into the grass, and sit. For a long while, you just listen, to the wind, to the silence. to your own heartbeat and the memories that come like tidewater. This is the last kind of medieval love, the one that lingers after. Death didn't end romance back then. It transformed it. People spoke to their lost lovers, lit candles on anniversaries, tied ribbons to graves. Some believed their beloved might appear in dreams or visit as a breeze, a shadow, a fox that stared too long before vanishing into the woods. One record from 1382 mentions a widow who set a place at her table every feast day for her late husband, for 40 years. Another tells of a young man who buried his sweetheart with a carved spoon, then left flowers every full moon until he died. Historians still argue whether these were acts of grief, devotion, or superstition. But honestly, it doesn't matter. They were love, quiet, enduring, ghost-touched. You whisper their name. Once, softly, like a prayer, like a secret. You talk to them, tell them about the harvest, the neighbor's new dog, the child born in the next hut, how you still dream of the garden, the lavender, the awkward kiss that never happened but might as well have. You thank them for the memory, for the ache, for the piece of your soul they carved their name into without asking. And as the wind shifts, you swear, for a moment, you feel them near, not as a specter or vision, just a warmth. You light another candle, not just for them, for all of them, for the ones who flirted in the market, who wrote terrible love letters, who danced at the maypole, who broke hearts and carried curses, who ran away together and who didn't dare, for every medieval soul who loved in secret, in joy, in pain, in spite of everything. Because love didn't wait for the Renaissance. It was always here, in the dirt, the parchment, the prayers. It still is. So now, as the fire dies low and the candles burn to stubs, your breath slows. The story fades, not abruptly, but gently, like the end of a song you didn't realize you were humming. You lie back, letting the straw-stuffed mattress settle around you. Your limbs grow heavy. The weight of centuries lifts like mist in the morning. Close your eyes. You've wandered through muddy markets and moonlit gardens, stood beneath church spires and whispered beside gravestones. You've felt the thrill of a shared glance, the burn of rejection, the ache of goodbye. And through it all, one thing has remained constant, the quiet, defiant, beautiful truth that people have always found ways to love, even when they weren't supposed to, even when it was foolish, risky, impossible, and somehow that makes it all the more human. So, wherever you are, whatever your own story looks like, take comfort in knowing you walk a path worn smooth by thousands before you, each of them reaching, fumbling, laughing, hoping, just like you. You can rest now. Let the voices of the past quiet. Let the candlelight flicker low. You've heard their stories. You've lived them tonight. And maybe, just maybe, some part of you was there all along. Good night.